What would you do if the very foundation of your family was shaken in an instant? Imagine this. A billionaire's life of power, prestige, and perfection is flipped upside down when his wife gives birth to twins, one white, the other biracial. In a single moment, whispers of scandal, betrayal, and long-buried truths erupt, threatening not only their family, but an empire built on an image of untouchable success. As the media swarms and secrets unravel, this family faces a choice: bury the truth to protect their legacy, or risk everything to embrace who they really are. But in a world where appearances are everything, the fight for love, acceptance, and redemption doesn't come easy. Stay with us as we dive into a gripping tale of resilience, betrayal, and the ultimate battle for family and identity. You won't believe how this story unfolds, and the shocking twists will leave you breathless. Don't go anywhere. This is one journey you don't want to miss. The opulent hospital suite exuded quiet luxury, every corner meticulously designed to emphasize wealth. Polished hardwood floors gleamed beneath the soft light of an ornate chandelier, while floor-to-ceiling windows framed the twinkling skyline of the city. Fresh lilies filled the room with their delicate fragrance, a calm contrast to the rising tension inside. Evelyn Harlow, pale and sweat-soaked, clutched the silk sheets of the hospital bed, her labored breaths echoing against the sterile walls. Her usually serene features were twisted in pain, a sheen of determination masking her exhaustion. Jonathan stood beside her, his hand gripping hers tightly. He was dressed impeccably, as always, in a tailored suit that only half disguised his rising panic. His free hand repeatedly swiped at the dark strands of hair falling across his forehead, a rare show of vulnerability from the billionaire tech mogul who prided himself on control. "Breathe, Evelyn," he whispered, though his own voice trembled. Evelyn glared at him between contractions, her chest heaving. "Don't tell me to breathe, Jonathan," she snapped, her words sharp despite her weakened state. Jonathan flinched but remained by her side, his thumb brushing her knuckles in a feeble attempt to reassure her. Around them, the medical team worked in quiet efficiency, the hum of machines punctuated by murmured instructions. "Almost there," Dr. Shaw said, her voice calm but focused. "One more push, Evelyn. You're doing great." The room seemed to hold its breath as Evelyn screamed, her body arching with effort. A single sharp cry pierced the air, filling the space with an almost tangible relief. A nurse lifted a squirming, pink-skinned infant into view, her tiny fists clenched as she wailed. "It's a girl," the nurse announced, her tone warm. Jonathan exhaled sharply, his tense shoulders dropping as his gaze locked onto the tiny life in the nurse's arms. His daughter. A flood of emotions surged through him: pride, awe, and a flicker of fear for the responsibility now lying in his hands. Evelyn's lips curved into a weary smile as the nurse placed the baby on her chest. "Isabel," she murmured, brushing her lips against the baby's soft forehead. Jonathan leaned closer, his heart swelling. "She's perfect," he whispered, the words escaping like a prayer. But the moment of calm shattered as Dr. Shaw's voice cut through. "Wait, there's another. Evelyn, you're not done yet." Evelyn's eyes widened, panic flaring as another wave of pain gripped her. "Another," she gasped, her grip on Jonathan's hand tightening until her nails bit into his skin. "Yes," Dr. Shaw confirmed, her tone clipped. "You're having twins. Focus, Evelyn. Push." Jonathan's world narrowed to the scene before him, his pulse pounding in his ears. Evelyn screamed again, her body racked with effort. A second cry broke the air moments later, softer but just as vibrant. The nurse held the newborn aloft, and for the second time that night, Jonathan felt the world shift beneath his feet. But this time, the shift was different. The boy in the nurse's arms had warm, caramel-colored skin, a stark contrast to the paleness of his sister. His features were distinct, beautiful, but undeniably different from the Harlow lineage. A silence, heavy with implication, descended over the room. The nurse faltered, glancing uncertainly between Jonathan and Evelyn. "It's a boy," she said hesitantly, her voice lacking the warmth of her earlier announcement. Jonathan stared, his mind struggling to process the sight before him. His chest tightened, confusion and dread rising like a tidal wave. Evelyn's trembling voice broke the silence. "Jonathan." Before she could say more, the doors swung open, and Lillian Harlow strode in, her sharp heels clicking against the polished floor. The matriarch's presence was as commanding as ever, her silver-streaked hair pinned back into an immaculate bun and her expression carved from stone. Her cold gaze swept over the room before landing on the newborn in the nurse's arms. Her eyes narrowed, and a flicker of something dark, disgust, passed across her face. "What is this?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. Jonathan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Lillian stepped closer, her piercing gaze fixed on Evelyn. "That boy, he isn't Jonathan's." Evelyn's face, already pale from exhaustion, turned ashen. "How dare you?" she rasped, her voice trembling with fury. Lillian ignored her, turning instead to Jonathan. "You can't allow this scandal to define us. That child must be dealt with." The weight of her words pressed down on him, suffocating. Jonathan's gaze flickered between his wife, his son, and his mother, the foundations of his world crumbling beneath him. The drive back to the Harlow estate was cloaked in silence, the kind that vibrated with tension. The limousine, with its leather seats and tinted windows, felt suffocating despite its size. Evelyn sat stiffly beside Jonathan, her arms wrapped protectively around the twins. Isabel slept soundly, her tiny hands clutching Evelyn's blouse, while Adam stirred fitfully, his soft cries cutting through the heavy quiet. Jonathan kept his gaze fixed on the city, lights streaking past the window. The weight of the night pressed against his chest, suffused with Lillian's venomous words. "We are not hiding Adam," Evelyn said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence like a whip. Her tone was calm, but her knuckles were white where they gripped the baby blanket. Jonathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Evelyn, it's not that simple." Her eyes flashed with anger. "It's not simple because you're letting her control you. Adam is your son, Jonathan. Are you really going to let her dictate his future?" The limousine slowed as they approached the estate gates, where a swarm of paparazzi had already gathered. Cameras flashed like lightning against the dark sky, their relentless clicks audible even from inside the car. Jonathan adjusted his tie, his jaw tightening. "Let me handle this." Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "You've had every opportunity to handle it, and all you've done is avoid making a choice." The car came to a stop, and a security guard opened the door. Jonathan stepped out first, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel driveway. The cameras erupted into a frenzy, their flashes blinding. Evelyn emerged next, holding the twins with an almost defiant pride, her posture daring anyone to question her. Inside the estate, Lillian awaited them in the grand parlor, her shadow stretching long against the flickering firelight. The room, with its gilded mirrors and antique furnishings, felt cold despite the flames. "You've come to your senses," she said, her voice sharp. Evelyn stepped forward, her chin held high. "We're here because this is our home, and Adam stays." Lillian's eyes flicked to Jonathan, her expression hardening. "Do you hear this nonsense? Your wife would rather destroy us than protect this family." Jonathan's hands clenched at his sides. "This isn't your decision, Mother." "It absolutely is." Lillian snapped. "Do you have any idea what people will say? What this will do to us?" Evelyn placed the twins in their bassinets, her movements deliberate. She turned to Jonathan, her voice trembling but resolute. "If you don't stand by us, Jonathan, I will leave. And I'll take them with me." The ultimatum hung in the air, suffocating. Jonathan felt his world teetering on the edge, the weight of his choice crushing him. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Harlow estate. Inside the sprawling mansion, the tension from earlier lingered, like a storm refusing to pass. Evelyn paced the nursery, her gaze darting between Isabel, who lay peacefully asleep, and Adam, whose soft whimpers broke the fragile silence. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the blanket around Adam. The weight of Lillian's accusations and Jonathan's silence sat heavy in her chest. She had known this moment might come, had rehearsed her defense in her mind 1,000 times, but she wasn't prepared for the reality of seeing her children reduced to pawns in a game of reputation and power. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Evelyn stiffened as Jonathan appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, and his usually composed face etched with exhaustion. He lingered there for a moment, watching her as if unsure how to begin. "We need to talk," he said finally, his voice low. Evelyn turned to face him, her arms folding across her chest. "Do we? Because all I've seen from you tonight is silence, Jonathan. Silence while your mother calls our son a scandal." Jonathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm trying to make sense of everything. You could have told me, Evelyn." "Told you what?" She shot back, her voice rising. "That I'm not the picture-perfect wife you married? That I have a heritage your family would never accept?" Jonathan flinched, guilt flickering across his features. "You should have trusted me." "Trusted you?" Evelyn's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Your mother has spent our entire marriage reminding me that I don't belong, and you've never once stood up to her." Jonathan opened his mouth to respond, but Evelyn cut him off. "Do you want to know why I didn't tell you, Jonathan? Because I was terrified. Terrified that the man I love would look at me the way you did tonight when you saw Adam." Her voice cracked, and she turned away, blinking back tears. Jonathan stepped forward, his hand hovering just above her shoulder before dropping to his side. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Evelyn faced him again, her expression softening but still guarded. "It's not just about me, Jonathan. It's about them. They're our children, and they deserve better than this." Jonathan nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to Adam. The baby's dark eyes met his, and for a moment, the weight of his doubts seemed to lift. He knelt by the bassinet, gently brushing a finger along Adam's tiny hand. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, "but I'll try. For them. For us." Evelyn's shoulders sagged with relief, though uncertainty still lingered in her heart. She reached out, resting a hand on his. "That's all I need to hear." Morning sunlight spilled through the massive windows of Jonathan's office, casting long streaks across the polished mahogany desk. Papers and files were scattered haphazardly, a stark contrast to Jonathan's usual meticulous organization. He sat at the edge of his chair, his elbows resting on the desk as he stared blankly at his phone. The incoming call screen displayed a familiar name, Marcus Price. Jonathan clenched his jaw. Marcus, his longtime business rival, had wasted no time in exploiting the media frenzy surrounding the twins. Reports of scandal in the Harlow family dominated every major outlet, tarnishing the pristine reputation Jonathan had spent years cultivating. The phone buzzed again, demanding attention. With a sigh, Jonathan swiped to answer. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Relax, Jonathan," Marcus drawled, his voice smooth and smug. "I just wanted to check in. Tough week, huh?" Jonathan's grip on the phone tightened. "If you're calling to gloat, save your breath." "Gloat?" Marcus chuckled. "Never. I'm just a concerned colleague. I mean, the timing couldn't be worse, could it? Right before your IPO." Jonathan's silence spoke volumes. "You know," Marcus continued, "these kinds of stories don't just fade away. Investors are skittish creatures. If you need help managing the fallout, I'd be happy to assist. For the right price, of course." Jonathan ended the call without a word, his hand shaking as he set the phone down. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes as the enormity of his situation pressed down on him. His company, his family, his legacy, all were teetering on the edge of collapse. The sound of footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up to see Lillian entering the office, her expression as imperious as ever. She moved with the precision of someone who expected the world to bend to her will. "Jonathan," she began, her tone clipped, "we need to act swiftly. The boy, Adam, must be sent away. The longer he's here, the more damage he does to this family." Jonathan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Enough, Mother. I've already made my decision. Adam stays. Lillian's eyes narrowed. Do you understand what you're risking? The company, the family name, everything we've built. What you've built, Jonathan interrupted, his voice firm. I won't sacrifice my son to protect your version of our legacy. For the first time, Lillian faltered. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned on her heel and swept from the room, her silence more unnerving than her words. Jonathan sank back into his chair, his gaze drifting to a framed photo on his desk. It was of him and Evelyn, taken on their wedding day. They had been so full of hope, so certain of their future. He picked up the photo, tracing Evelyn's smile with his thumb. I won't let us fall apart, he murmured. Not like this. The morning sunlight had barely touched the edges of the Harlow estate when the sound of relentless camera shutters pierced the tranquil air. Outside the mansion gates, dozens of reporters and paparazzi swarmed like vultures, their voices rising in a chaotic symphony of shouted questions and flashing bulbs. Inside, Evelyn stood by the nursery window, peering out from behind the thick velvet curtains. Her lips pressed into a tight line as she watched the spectacle unfolding beyond the iron gates. The twins lay peacefully in their bassinets, unaware of the storm brewing outside. They're like wolves, she muttered, her voice low but laced with anger. Jonathan entered the room, his sleeves rolled up and his tie undone, a rare, disheveled sight. He joined Evelyn at the window, his gaze narrowing as he took in the scene. This is worse than I expected, he admitted, rubbing his temples. The story broke overnight. Every outlet is running with it. Evelyn turned to him, her eyes flashing with fury. And what exactly is the story, Jonathan? That our son doesn't fit their perfect narrative of what a Harlow should look like. Jonathan flinched but didn't respond. He knew better than to argue when Evelyn was in this state. Instead, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through the headlines that had been flooding his notifications. Harlow family scandal. Twins of different races spark questions. Billionaire legacy threatened by shocking revelation. And worse still, is Evelyn Harlow's fidelity in question? Evelyn saw the headlines over his shoulder and let out a bitter laugh. It's always the woman, isn't it? The one who's doubted, the one who's questioned. Never mind that Adam is your son too. Jonathan's face hardened. You think I don't know that? Do you think I haven't been defending you and our family all mornings? And yet you still let your mother run this house like it's her kingdom, Evelyn snapped. She's feeding these rumors, Jonathan. You know it as well as I do. Jonathan hesitated. Lillian's influence was undeniable, and he couldn't ignore the possibility that she had leaked certain details to the press in a misguided attempt to protect the family's image. I'll handle my mother, he said finally. But right now, we need to control the narrative. If we let this spiral, it could destroy more than just our family. It could ruin everything I've built. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Everything you've built. What about what we've built, Jonathan? What about our children? Before Jonathan could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. A member of the household staff entered, looking uneasy. Sir, ma'am, there's someone at the gates demanding to speak with you. A journalist. Jonathan's jaw clenched. Send them away. The staff member hesitated. It's not just any journalist, sir. It's Maria Caldwell. Evelyn's expression shifted. Maria Caldwell was a renowned investigative journalist, known for her integrity and refusal to be bought by powerful interests. If anyone could be trusted to tell the truth about their family, it was her. Let her in, Evelyn said before Jonathan could protest. Are you sure? He asked, his voice low. Yes, Evelyn said firmly. If we don't tell our story, someone else will. Maria Caldwell sat across from Evelyn and Jonathan in the grand drawing room, her notepad balanced on her knee and a recorder placed discreetly on the coffee table between them. Her presence was calm but commanding, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of the room and the couple before her. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, she began, her voice steady. I know this must be a difficult time for your family. Evelyn glanced at Jonathan before responding. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it, but we're here because we believe in the truth, and we refuse to let anyone else define our story. Maria nodded, her pen moving swiftly across the notepad. Let's start with the basics. There's been a lot of speculation about your twins. Would you like to address that directly? Jonathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Evelyn spoke without hesitation. Yes, Adam and Isabel are both our children. They are twins and we love them equally. Their differences are not a scandal, they're a blessing. Maria's gaze flickered to Jonathan. And yet, the media has painted a different picture. There are even rumors that Adam isn't biologically yours, Mr. Harlow. Would you like to comment on that? Jonathan bristled, but forced himself to remain calm. Adam is my son. Anyone suggesting otherwise is either misinformed or malicious. This family will not be torn apart by lies. As the interview continued, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope. Maria's questions were tough but fair, and Evelyn believed they were making progress in reclaiming their narrative. But that hope was short-lived. Later that evening, as Evelyn scrolled through social media, her blood ran cold. A leaked photo of Adam's birth certificate had surfaced, with key details altered to suggest that Jonathan wasn't the father. The post had gone viral, accompanied by malicious captions questioning Evelyn's fidelity. She stormed into Jonathan's office, the phone shaking in her hand. "Did you see this?" she demanded, thrusting the screen in his face. Jonathan's face darkened as he read the post. "Where did this come from?" "You tell me," Evelyn shot back, "because the only person who could have accessed this is someone in this house." They both froze as the realization hit. Lillian. The Harlow estate's drawing room felt like a battlefield. Evelyn stood in the center, her hands trembling with fury as she faced Lillian. The older woman, as poised as ever, sat in a high-backed chair, her expression one of thinly veiled disdain. Jonathan hovered near the doorway, his presence torn between mediator and observer, though he looked as if he wanted to disappear altogether. "You leaked it," Evelyn accused, her voice low but dangerous. "You doctored Adam's birth certificate to make it look like Jonathan isn't his father." Lillian raised an eyebrow, her calm exterior unshaken. "Do you have proof of such an accusation, Evelyn?" "I don't need proof," Evelyn snapped. "I know it was you. You've been trying to erase Adam since the moment he was born." Jonathan stepped forward, his voice tense. "Mother, tell me you didn't do this." Lillian finally stood, brushing invisible lint from her immaculate blazer. "Everything I've done for this family," she said, her voice icy. "Your company, your reputation, your future. Do you really think any of it will survive this scandal?" "You mean your version of this family," Evelyn retorted. "Your obsession with control and appearances has poisoned everything it touches. But I won't let you poison my children." Lillian's eyes flashed with anger, but her voice remained even. "You're being emotional, Evelyn. This is about preserving what we've built, what Jonathan has built." Evelyn stepped closer, her voice rising. "What Jonathan has built. I've been by his side every step of the way, supporting him, raising our children. And you," her voice cracked with emotion, "you want to tear it all apart because of your outdated, hateful views." Jonathan's head snapped toward his mother. "Mother, enough. This isn't your decision to make." Lillian's lips thinned. "You'll regret this, Jonathan. Mark my words." As Lillian swept out of the room, Evelyn turned to Jonathan, her chest heaving. "I can't do this anymore, Jonathan. I can't keep fighting her while you stand on the sidelines." Jonathan looked at her, guilt etched into every line of his face. "I'm not on the sidelines, Evelyn. I'm with you." "Then prove it," she whispered. "Because I can't keep doing this alone." Across the city, in a sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the skyline, Marcus Price watched the latest headlines with a satisfied smirk. His carefully tailored suit reflected his calculated demeanor. The Harlow family scandal had provided him with the perfect opening to strike, and he wasn't about to waste it. "Mr. Price," his assistant said as she entered the room, "your meeting with investors is scheduled for noon." Marcus nodded, his mind already spinning with plans. He knew that Jonathan's IPO was teetering on the brink of collapse, and he intended to capitalize on every weakness. The media frenzy around the twins had investors questioning Jonathan's ability to maintain control, a doubt Marcus was eager to fuel. As his assistant left, Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. The call connected after 2 rings. "Lillian," he said smoothly. "How are things on your end?" "Messy," she replied, her tone clipped. "Jonathan refuses to see reason. He's letting that woman ruin everything." Marcus chuckled. "That woman is smarter than you give her credit for. Evelyn's been holding things together while Jonathan spins in circles. But that just makes my job easier. What are you planning?" Lillian asked, her voice wary. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "A simple push in the right direction. I'll spook the investors enough to pull out of the IPO. Once Jonathan's company is in freefall, I'll make my move. And then," Lillian prompted, "and then the Harlow Empire will belong to me," Marcus said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Back at the Harlow estate, Evelyn sat in the nursery with the twins, her fingers brushing through Adam's soft curls as Isabel slept beside him. The weight of the day pressed heavily on her chest. Jonathan entered quietly, his presence filling the room with an unspoken tension. "They're innocent," Evelyn said softly, not turning to look at him. "They don't deserve to carry the burden of our mistakes." Jonathan sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the twins. "You're right. They don't. And I won't let them." Evelyn looked at him, searching his face for sincerity. "What are you going to do, Jonathan?" His jaw tightened. "I'm going to end this. All of it." The Harlow family archive room was a cavernous space, hidden deep within the estate, a place most family members rarely visited. Shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty tomes, ledgers, and photo albums chronicling the dynasty's history. The air smelled faintly of aged paper and cedarwood, a scent that carried the weight of generations past. Jonathan hadn't been in this room for years. Yet now, driven by a gnawing suspicion, he sifted through the family's meticulous records, searching for answers. The confrontation with his mother lingered in his mind, her words echoing with veiled threats and contradictions. "Everything I've done for this family." But what had she done, exactly? What secrets did she harbor that justified her cold, unyielding behavior? Jonathan's fingers trailed over a weathered leather-bound journal labeled with his grandfather's name, Theodore Harlow. He opened it carefully, the brittle pages crackling under his touch. The entries were methodical, documenting business deals, family events, and occasional personal musings. One entry, dated nearly 60 years ago, caught his attention. March 12, 1965. "Our union was a quiet one. Though Margaret fears society's judgment, I've assured her that love knows no bounds. I'll protect her, always." Jonathan frowned. The words didn't align with the image of his stern, uncompromising grandfather he'd grown up hearing about. Intrigued, he flipped through the pages, uncovering more references to Margaret, his grandmother, and her struggles with societal expectations. Then he found it, a faded photograph tucked between the pages. It showed Theodore and Margaret standing arm in arm, their love evident even in the black and white image. But what struck Jonathan was Margaret's complexion, a warm, golden hue that suggested mixed ancestry. He leaned back in his chair, the pieces falling into place. Lillian's obsession with appearances, her desperate need to suppress anything that might threaten the family's image, it all stemmed from a secret she had spent her entire life hiding. Jonathan closed the journal, his heart pounding. He knew what he had to do next. The grand dining room of the Harlow estate was a cold and imposing space, its opulence amplified by the silence that hung heavily in the air. Lillian sat at the head of the long mahogany table, her posture regal and unyielding as always. Jonathan entered the room, the journal tucked under his arm, his expression a mix of determination and disappointment. "Jonathan," Lillian greeted coolly, not bothering to rise. "I assume you're here to discuss something important." "I am," he said, his voice steady. He placed the journal on the table and slid it toward her. "Do you recognize this?" Lillian's gaze flickered to the journal, her composure faltering for the briefest of moments before she recovered. "What is this about?" "It's about you," Jonathan said, his tone sharpening. "And the truth you've been hiding from me, hiding from all of us." Lillian stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Mother," Jonathan snapped, his patience wearing thin. "Grandfather married a biracial woman. Margaret wasn't the pure, perfect socialite you've painted her to be. She was as much a part of this family as anyone, and you spent your entire life burying her legacy." Lillian's eyes narrowed, her hands gripping the edges of the table. "You don't understand what it was like back then, Jonathan. Do you think the world would have accepted us if they knew the truth? Your grandfather did what he had to do to protect this family, and so have I. Protect us." Jonathan repeated incredulously. "You've done nothing but tear us apart. Evelyn, Adam, me? We've all been victims of your obsession with a lie." Lillian rose from her chair, her voice trembling with uncharacteristic emotion. "I have sacrificed everything for this family. Do you think I wanted to erase Margaret? I loved her, but the world wouldn't have accepted her. They would have destroyed us." Jonathan stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time, he saw not just the cold, calculating matriarch, but a woman haunted by the choices she had made, trapped by a world that demanded perfection. "It doesn't have to be like this anymore," Jonathan said quietly. "We have a chance to do things differently, to honor the truth instead of hiding it." Lillian's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. For a moment, Jonathan thought she might agree, but then her expression hardened once more. "You're a fool if you think the world has changed," she said, her voice like steel. "Do what you want, Jonathan, but don't expect me to stand by and watch you destroy everything we've built." She swept from the room, leaving Jonathan alone at the table. He looked down at the journal, the photograph of his grandparents staring back at him. The road ahead was clear, but it wouldn't be easy. The glass skyline of the city glistened in the distance as Jonathan sat at his office, his desk cluttered with reports, investor briefs, and the latest updates on the scandal engulfing his family. The air in the room was tense, as if the weight of his decisions had soaked into the walls themselves. His assistant knocked, stepping in without waiting for a response. "Sir, Marcus Price just issued a press statement." Jonathan's head snapped up. "What kind of statement?" She hesitated. He implied instability in Harlow Industries due to personal distractions. "The media is eating it up." Jonathan's chest tightened. Marcus had always been a shark, circling at the first sign of blood in the water. And right now, Jonathan's family turmoil was the perfect chum. "Pull up the footage," Jonathan instructed, gesturing to the large monitor on the wall. The screen flickered to life, showing Marcus seated confidently at a press conference. His words dripped with calculated charm. "Harlow Industries has been a pillar of innovation and reliability for years," Marcus said, his voice smooth. "But recent events raise questions about leadership stability. Investors need to be assured that their interests are protected in these uncertain times." Jonathan's fist clenched as Marcus's words sowed seeds of doubt among shareholders. The reporters pressed him for details, and though Marcus feigned reluctance, he hinted at unresolved family matters and potentially damaging revelations. "Shut it off," Jonathan said, his voice tight. The screen went dark, but the damage had already been done. As his assistant left, Evelyn walked into the office, carrying Adam on her hip. Isabel trailed behind her, clutching a plush toy rabbit. "Marcus again?" Evelyn asked, her tone weary but sharp. Jonathan nodded, running a hand through his hair. "He's trying to spook the investors. If he succeeds, it could derail the IPO completely. And what are you going to do about it?" Evelyn's gaze was steady, her voice cutting through the tension. "Because he's not just attacking your company, Jonathan. He's attacking our family." Jonathan sighed, standing and pacing the room. "I know, but every move I make feels like stepping into quicksand." Evelyn shifted Adam to her other arm and stepped closer. "Then stop reacting and start leading. If you keep letting Marcus and your mother control the narrative, we'll lose everything. Our family, your company, all of it." Jonathan paused, her words sinking in. She was right. He couldn't afford to sit back any longer. It was time to fight back. The atmosphere in his state had grown colder, the once grand halls now filled with unspoken tension. Evelyn packed a suitcase in their bedroom, her movements sharp and deliberate. Adam lay on the bed beside her, gurgling happily, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Jonathan entered, freezing when he saw the open suitcase. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," Evelyn said simply, not bothering to look at him. "I've fought for this family, Jonathan, but I can't fight alone anymore. If you're not willing to stand up for us, then I'll take the twins and go." Jonathan's stomach dropped. "Evelyn, wait. Don't do this." She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "Do you know how exhausting it is to defend our children while your mother undermines us and Marcus attacks from the outside? And all the while, you sit on the sidelines, afraid to take stand." "I'm not sitting on the sidelines," Jonathan protested. "I've been trying to hold everything together." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "You've been trying to avoid conflict. But avoiding conflict isn't the same as fixing it." Jonathan stepped closer, his voice softening. "Evelyn, I love you. I love Isabel and Adam. Everything I've done has been to protect the company," Evelyn finished, her voice bitter. "But at what cost? Our family is falling apart, Jonathan." Her words hung in the air like a final judgment. For the first time, Jonathan saw the depth of her exhaustion, the weight she had carried alone for so long. "Please," Jonathan said, his voice breaking. "Give me a chance to make this right." Evelyn studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "One chance, Jonathan. But I won't wait forever." Downstairs, Lillian sat in the parlor, sipping tea as if nothing had changed. But the lines of tension around her mouth betrayed her unease. She glanced up as Jonathan entered, his face set with resolve. "This ends now," Jonathan said, his voice firm. Lillian arched an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "Your manipulation, your interference. It stops today. I won't let you drive Evelyn and the twins away." Lillian set her teacup down with deliberate precision. "And how you plan to stop me, Jonathan? I've done nothing but protect this family." "You've protected an illusion," Jonathan shot back. "And in doing so, you've nearly destroyed everything else." Lillian's gaze turned icy. "If you side with her over me, don't expect me to save you when this all comes crashing down." Jonathan stood his ground. "I don't need saving, Mother. What I need is my family." The study was dimly lit, the soft glow of a single desk lamp illuminating the mess of papers strewn across Jonathan's desk. He sat in the leather chair, staring at the photograph of his family taken on Isabel and Adam's first day home. Evelyn's radiant smile and the twins' innocent faces seemed like relics of a life he was in danger of losing. His laptop screen blinked with emails from his board of directors, all demanding answers about the media circus and the sudden dip in stock interest following Marcus Price's press statement. Investors were pulling out of the IPO, and whispers of a hostile takeover had begun circulating. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, the weight of failure pressing heavily on his chest. The man who had built a billion-dollar empire now faced its possible collapse, not because of the company's flaws, but because of his inability to manage his family's image and the truth. "Enough," he whispered to himself. Taking a deep breath, he opened a blank email draft and began typing. He wrote to his PR team, giving instructions to arrange a press conference. For the first time, he was determined to control the narrative, to speak directly to the world and address the questions that had consumed the media for weeks. But it wasn't just the company or the public he needed to face. His family needed him to act, not as a CEO or a businessman, but as a husband and father. The next morning, Jonathan found Evelyn in the nursery, playing with the twins. Isabel giggled as Evelyn tickled her feet, while Adam babbled happily, clutching a toy train. The sight was a sharp contrast to the turmoil he felt, and it steeled his resolve. "Evelyn," he began, his voice softer than usual. She looked up at him, her expression guarded but curious. "What is it?" He stepped closer, his hands in his pockets. "I've called a press conference. This afternoon. I'm going to tell the truth about everything." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Jonathan, are you sure? The backlash." "Doesn't matter," he interrupted. "You were right. I've been trying to protect the wrong things. It's time to stop hiding and start fighting for what really matters." Evelyn studied him, searching for any hesitation. Finding none, she nodded. "Then I'll stand with you." The Harlow estate's grand foyer was unusually quiet, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Lillian stood by the staircase, watching as Jonathan prepared to leave for the press conference. Her arms were crossed, and her sharp eyes tracked his every move. "This is a mistake, Jonathan," she said, her tone as cold as ever. "You'll destroy everything we've built." Jonathan paused, adjusting his cufflinks before turning to face her. "No, Mother. I'll destroy the illusion you've built. And if the truth takes it down, then so be it." Lillian's lips thinned. "You're throwing away decades of work. Do you think a world will respect you for airing your dirty laundry?" Jonathan stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't about respect. It's about integrity. About giving my children a future where they don't have to hide who they are." For the first time, Lillian faltered. Her hands tightened on the banister as she tried to summon the commanding presence she was known for. But Jonathan's words struck a nerve, and the cracks in her armor began to show. "You don't understand what you're risking," she said, her voice quieter now. "I've spent my entire life protecting this family, and in doing so, you've suffocated it," Jonathan replied. "This ends today." Lillian's gaze dropped to the floor, her composure slipping entirely. "Your grandfather, he tried to do the same thing once. It nearly destroyed us. You're stronger than him, Jonathan. Don't let this be your downfall." Jonathan shook his head. "I'm not stronger than him, Mother. I'm just finally willing to do what he couldn't. Be honest." Without another word, he turned and walked out the door, leaving Lillian standing alone in the silence of the estate. The press conference was held in a sleek event hall downtown, the room packed with reporters and cameras. Evelyn sat in the front row, holding Adam on her lap, while Isabel sat beside her, clutching her mother's hand. The murmurs of the crowd quieted as Jonathan stepped onto the stage, the spotlight casting a stark glow over him. He cleared his throat, his heart pounding. "Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today." His voice grew steadier as he continued. "Over the past few weeks, my family has been the subject of intense media scrutiny. Rumors, speculation, and outright lies have painted a distorted picture of who we are. Today, I want to set the record straight." Jonathan paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Yes, my twins, Isabel and Adam, are of different races. Yes, Adam's skin tone reflects his mother's biracial heritage, a heritage we are proud of. They are my children, and they are a testament to love, not scandal." The room erupted with flashes of cameras and the scribbling of pens, but Jonathan pressed on. "For too long, I've let others define my story. Today, I'm taking that power back. My family and I refuse to live in the shadow of prejudice and fear. We are proud of who we are, and we stand united." As he finished, the room broke into applause, a mix of genuine support and professional courtesy from the press. Evelyn smiled from her seat, her eyes brimming with tears. The aftermath of the press conference brought a strange calm to the Harlow estate. For the first time in weeks, the media frenzy began to subside, replaced by a more measured conversation about race, legacy, and family values. Jonathan's bold statement had shifted the narrative, but the challenges were far from over. Evelyn stood in the estate's garden, the morning sunlight filtering through the treetops as Adam and Isabel played on a blanket nearby. She watched them with a soft smile, their laughter a balm for her weary heart. The weight of recent events had taken its toll, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path drew her attention. She turned to see Maria Caldwell, the journalist who had first interviewed them, approaching with a notebook in hand. "Evelyn," Maria greeted with a warm smile. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me again." Evelyn nodded, gesturing for Maria to join her on the garden bench. "I wanted to speak with you because there's more to this story than what Jonathan shared at the press conference." Maria raised an eyebrow, her pen poised over her notepad. "I'm listening." Evelyn took a deep breath. "For years, I've hidden my heritage, not because I was ashamed, but because I was afraid. Afraid of how people like Lillian, people like society at large, would judge me. But my children deserve better. They deserve to grow up in a world where they don't have to hide who they are. Maria scribbled furiously, her expression thoughtful. So you're taking a stand not just for your family, but for others who face the same struggles. Yes, Evelyn said firmly. I want to use this platform to advocate for change, for inclusion. If we don't speak up, nothing will ever improve. Maria smiled. That's a powerful message, Evelyn. I think your story could inspire a lot of people. As they spoke, Evelyn felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't experienced before. This wasn't just about defending her family anymore. It was about creating a legacy her children could be proud of. The boardroom of Harlow Industries was a study in tension. The large glass windows framed a panoramic view of the city, but the atmosphere inside was anything but serene. Marcus Price sat at one end of a long table, his smirk barely concealed as he watched the nervous investors whisper among themselves. Jonathan entered the room with an air of quiet confidence, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had plagued him in recent weeks. He carried a folder under his arm, its contents the culmination of sleepless nights and relentless effort. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan began, his voice steady. Thank you for joining me today. I'm aware that recent events have caused concern among our investors, and I'm here to address those concerns. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his smirk widening. And what reassurance can you possibly offer, Jonathan? Your company is bleeding investors and your reputation. Well, let's just say it's taken a hit. Jonathan ignored him, placing the folder on the table and sliding it toward the investors. Inside, you'll find the details of our latest initiative, a partnership with several leading organizations to promote diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. This isn't just a PR move. It's a commitment to values that matter. The investors flipped through the documents, their murmurs growing more optimistic. Marcus, however, frowned. A noble sentiment, but is it enough to stop your stock from plummeting? Jonathan's gaze locked on Marcus, his calm demeanor hiding a simmering determination. It's not just sentiment, Marcus. It's strategy. And while we're on the subject of strategies, he pulled out another folder, this one labeled with Marcus's name. I thought the board might find it interesting to review some of your recent activities. Marcus stiffened, his smirk vanishing. What is this? Jonathan opened the folder, revealing records of questionable business dealings, insider trading, and other damning evidence. This is what you've been up to while trying to destabilize Harlow Industries, and I've already submitted it to the authorities. The room fell silent as Marcus's face drained of color. You can't be serious. Oh, I am, Jonathan said, his voice cold. You've spent weeks trying to tear me down. Now it's your turn to face the consequences. As security escorted Marcus out of the building, Jonathan turned back to the investors. Harlow Industries will weather this storm, not because we're perfect, but because we're committed to growth and integrity. If you're with us, I promise we'll come out stronger. The investors nodded, their confidence in Jonathan visibly restored. The warm glow of the afternoon sun bathed the Harlow estate in soft golden light, casting long shadows over the sprawling garden. Evelyn stood on the terrace, watching as Isabel and Adam played together on the lawn. Their laughter echoed through the air, a sound so pure it momentarily eased the weight on her chest. Jonathan approached quietly, his footsteps soft on the stone tiles. Evelyn sensed his presence, but didn't turn around, her gaze fixed on the children. They're so resilient, she said softly. After everything, they're still full of joy. Jonathan stepped beside her, his hands in his pockets. They get that from you? Evelyn glanced at him, her expression cautious. Did the meeting go well? He nodded, his jaw tight, but his eyes steady. Marcus is out. He won't be a problem anymore. The board is back on our side, and the IPO is moving forward. That's good, Evelyn said, her voice neutral. For the company. Jonathan turned to face her fully, his brow furrowed. It's not just about the company, Evelyn. It's about us. About fixing what I've broken. Evelyn folded her arms across her chest, her lips pressing into a thin line. You can't just fix this with a press conference or business move, Jonathan. This isn't about numbers or public opinion. It's about trust. I know, he said quietly. "And I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I want to start earning it." She studied him for a long moment, her heart conflicted. She wanted to believe him, to trust that his words were more than just an apology. But the scars of his inaction and hesitation ran deep. "What are you willing to do, Jonathan?" she asked. "Not for the company, not for your mother, but for us, for this family." His gaze didn't waver. "Anything, everything. Starting with setting boundaries with my mother and putting you and the twins first. No more hiding. No more avoiding the hard conversations." Evelyn's defenses softened slightly, though doubts still lingered. "Words are easy, Jonathan. I need to see action." "You will," he promised. "Just don't leave. Give me a chance to prove it." After a long silence, Evelyn nodded slowly. "One chance, Jonathan. Don't waste it." Weeks passed, and the Harlow family began to rebuild. Jonathan threw himself into both his family and his work, determined to honor his promise to Evelyn. His first step was the announcement of the Harlow Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, a program designed to support underrepresented groups in the tech industry. The initiative's launch event was held at a sleek downtown venue, the modern space filled with journalists, investors, and community leaders. Evelyn stood by Jonathan's side, her presence a quiet but powerful statement of unity. Isabel and Adam, dressed in matching outfits, were with them, their innocence a symbol of the family's fresh start. Jonathan stepped onto the stage, his voice steady as he addressed the audience. "This initiative isn't just a response to recent events, it's a commitment to the future. At Harlow Industries, we believe that diversity isn't a weakness, it's a strength. And it's time we use that strength to build a better world." The room erupted in applause, the energy electric. Evelyn watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. This was the Jonathan she had fallen in love with, the man who wasn't afraid to stand for something bigger than himself. After the speech, Jonathan joined Evelyn and the twins, his expression softening as he crouched to pick up Adam. "What did you think, buddy? Was Dad boring?" Adam giggled, reaching for Jonathan's tie, while Isabel clung to Evelyn's leg, shyly peeking at the crowd. Evelyn smiled, placing a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. "You did well. I'm proud of you." Jonathan looked up at her, his gaze filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." That evening, back at the estate, the family gathered in the living room for the first time in weeks. Lillian was notably absent, having chosen to distance herself after Jonathan's public rejection of her methods. The absence of her domineering presence brought an unexpected sense of peace to the household. Jonathan poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Evelyn as they sat together on the couch. The twins had fallen asleep upstairs, their soft breathing a reminder of the family's strength. "To new beginnings," Jonathan said, raising his glass. Evelyn hesitated for a moment before clinking her glass against his. "To new beginnings." The clink of the glasses felt symbolic, a fragile but hopeful step toward healing. The echo of Lillian's heels reverberated through the empty halls of the Harlow estate as she descended the grand staircase. Her usually composed demeanor had been replaced by something sharper, colder. Her suitcase rested by the door, an uncharacteristic symbol of defeat for the matriarch who had always ruled her domain with an iron will. Jonathan stood waiting at the base of the stairs, his arms crossed. He had spent the morning overseeing her departure, ensuring there would be no room for further manipulation or sabotage. Evelyn watched from the shadows of the parlor, her expression unreadable but her presence firm, a silent witness to the end of Lillian's reign. "You're really doing this," Lillian said, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. "Exiling your own mother from her home." "This isn't exile," Jonathan replied, his tone measured but unyielding. "It's accountability. You've spent your life controlling everyone around you, thinking it was for the greater good. But all you've done is tear this family apart." Lillian's gaze flicked to Evelyn, her lips thinning. "And you think she's the answer? That woman has brought nothing but scandal and shame to this family." Jonathan's eyes narrowed, his voice hardening. "No, Mother. She brought love, resilience, and truth. the things you tried to bury under your obsession with appearances. For a moment, Lillian's mask cracked. Her eyes softened, betraying a flicker of something that almost looked like regret. I did what I thought was right, to protect this family. You were protecting yourself, Jonathan said firmly. But it's over now. It's time for you to step aside. Lillian straightened, her composure returning. You'll regret this, Jonathan. When the world turns against you, don't come looking for me. Without another word, she walked to the door, her heels clicking with finality. A car waited in the circular driveway to take her to a smaller, less opulent property Jonathan had arranged. It wasn't a punishment, but a clear boundary, a declaration that her influence no longer dictated the Harlow family's future. As the car disappeared down the driveway, Jonathan exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging. Evelyn stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but this needed to happen." Evelyn nodded, her voice soft. "Sometimes letting go is the hardest thing, but it's the only way to heal." The Harlow estate was alive with energy, its grand ballroom transformed into a vibrant celebration. Guests mingled under crystal chandeliers, their voices and laughter filling the space. The Harlow Diversity and Inclusion Foundation had officially launched, and tonight was its inaugural gala. Evelyn stood by the entrance, her sleek navy gown shimmering under the soft lights. She greeted guests with warmth, her presence a beacon of strength and resilience. Across the room, Jonathan spoke with several key donors, his confidence palpable as he outlined the foundation's vision for a more inclusive future. The twins, dressed in miniature formal attire, were the stars of the evening. Isabel twirled in her dress, delighting the crowd, while Adam toddled after her, his infectious laughter drawing smiles from even the most stoic attendees. As the evening progressed, Jonathan joined Evelyn near the stage, their hands brushing as they stood side by side. A hush fell over the room as Jonathan took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonating with conviction, "tonight is more than a celebration. It's a turning point. For too long, our family and our company have been defined by a narrow vision of success, one that excluded, hid, and silenced those who didn't fit a specific mold. But no more." He paused, glancing at Evelyn and the twins, his voice softening. "This foundation is our commitment to change, to creating a future where no one has to hide who they are to belong, where love, acceptance, and diversity are celebrated, not hidden." The applause was thunderous, a standing ovation sweeping across the room. Jonathan stepped back, his hand finding Evelyn's as they shared a quiet smile. Later that night, the family returned to the estate, the twins fast asleep in the car. Jonathan carried Adam upstairs while Evelyn tucked Isabel into bed. When they finally settled in the living room, the weight of the evening gave way to a deep sense of peace. Jonathan poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Evelyn. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "No," Evelyn corrected gently, her eyes sparkling. "You did it. You found the strength to lead, not just for the company, but for us." Jonathan smiled, leaning back against the couch. "It feels different now, like we're finally free." Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "We are. And this is just the beginning." As the night deepened, the Harlow family sat together in their home, united by the love and resilience that had carried them through the storm. For the first time in years, the future felt bright, and the legacy they were building was one rooted in truth, acceptance, and hope. Thank you for watching and engaging with this incredible story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to support our work. Your feedback and participation help us create more impactful and meaningful stories. We'd love to hear from you. What part of the story had the most impact on you? Was a specific moment, a character's decision, or the overall theme? Share your thoughts in comments. Your voice matters. Have ideas for future stories? Let us know what kinds of tales you'd like to see on the channel. Whether it's drama, suspense, romance, or something entirely different, we're here to bring your suggestions to life. Thank you for being part of our journey. Your support and creativity inspire us to keep sharing stories that move hearts and spark imaginations.